Extreme fire behavior on the border, hundreds of firefighters racing to beat back the flames. The weather challenges for fire crews and property owners.
I feel like we're in a similar crisis situation.
And San Diego volunteers stepping up to provide relief from the heat and why one group of people may not be able to access cooling zones. And the extreme heat has prompted a flex alert. The worries for utility companies as people crank up their air conditioners. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amitha Sharma. In the midst of record-breaking temperatures, more than 3,000 firefighters are battling 10 large wildfires across California. New evacuations were ordered in East San Diego County after a 1,900-acre fire grew out of control. KPBS reporter Taryn Mento says the terrain, heat, and the recent drought are making the situation even more challenging.
Several hundred firefighters are responding to the border fire in Portrero, which is located about 25 miles east of here. Many of them arriving right on this road, and even more crews are on their way. The land is black and smoldering in one area as crews dump retardant and battle flames in another. Firefighters are trying to keep the fire from reaching homes after it grew and direction shifted Monday afternoon. Fire Captain Kendall Borteaser says the situation is escalating rapidly because of the high temperatures and dry terrain.
Once the sun came up, the fire got established in certain areas of the area out there. It got some good wind, it found some terrain, it found some good fuels, and the fire just really took off on us. The fire intensity increased. They had a rapid rate of spread and extreme fire behavior. And so those were the conditions that the crews have been dealing with all day today.
A burned cell tower also limited officials' ability to communicate, which added to the complications. The town of Portrero was already ordered to evacuate, and the new communities include Forest Gate, Star Ranch, Cowboy Ranch, Dog Patch, and Canyon City. CAL FIRE's Borteaser is urging those who are under evacuation orders to listen to them. He says those who don't put themselves and those who would have to rescue them at risk. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
Soaring temperatures and bone-dry conditions are also fueling a fast-moving brush fire in the Angeles National Forest. The reservoir fire started just after 11 a.m. It has grown to 2,000 acres with zero containment. Several neighborhoods in the city of Azusa are under evacuation orders. Class is still in session for some San Diego schools despite the heat wave. San Diego Unified School District says it has placed more air conditioners at campuses over the past year. There are still schools that do not have AC, including Monroe Clark Middle School.
It's really hot in there. There's like the fans, but that's barely anything.
It's not good for them, but at the same time they're under the shade, but they're still not good.
District officials would call for minimum days at schools without AC when the temperatures hit 95 degrees or higher. During heat waves, spending just a few hours inside an air-conditioned building can make a world of difference. That's the concept behind the county's cooling zones. From our North County Bureau, KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg tells us about one cool zone in San Marcos.
The San Marcos Library is one of the busiest in the county system. It's also one of the county's official cool zones. So when it gets hot in North County, branch manager Ruth Ketchum says the library gets even more crowded than usual.
Most of the staff lives here in San Marcos or Escondido or nearby Carlsbad. So, this is our community. These are our neighbors, our friends, everyone, including, people living on the street or whatever. Everybody's welcome to come.
People of all ages were in the library today enjoying a breather from the blistering heat. Amanda Bustamante said she usually brings her son to the park before they visit the library.
But with being so hot, it's just easier just to come and read some books, and then they have the nice little playroom that my son enjoys playing with Legos, so it's nice to get a break from the heat inside.
There are more than 115 air-conditioned cool zones countywide. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
Record-breaking heat has many looking to cool off by staying inside, but that may not be possible for some of San Diego's homeless population. KPBS reporter Matt Bowler met up with one group who was trying to make life bearable for them.
On hot days, a cool glass of water is a simple pleasure, but it can be one that's hard to come by for San Diego's homeless. After hearing about the heat advisory and learning about cool zones around the county, this small group decided to set up their own cool zone, but for the homeless. Sunday and today, they set up under a small patch of shade in the East Village for volunteers, including former mayoral candidate Lori Saldana, filling paper cups with ice water for anyone that stopped by. Saldana says not everyone has transportation to get to a cool zone, and many homeless don't want to leave their belongings on the street while they cool off inside.
I've done EMT training and wilderness emergency medicine, and I feel like we're in a similar crisis situation where we just don't have the response needed to manage people's basic care.
The group says they helped hundreds on Sunday and expect to serve the same number today. They say the pop-up cooling station will remain until the heat subsides. Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
Customers across Southern California are being asked to conserve power today amid the region's extreme temperatures. The California Independent System Operator has declared a flex alert until 9 o'clock tonight. That means not using large appliances like washers and dryers, keeping the air conditioners set at 78 or above, and closing your blinds during the day to keep the heat out, and waiting until nighttime to charge your electric vehicle.
If we're not generating enough power to supply what customers are actually using, then it might lead to rotating outages, but we never want it to get to that point. That's why we're preparing them now. We're preparing our crews now to ensure our system remains safe and reliable.
SDG&E says there are some outages due to the fire in East County, and they have crews standing by to make sure there is enough power to serve customers. Today also marks the first day of summer. Heather Waldman says record-breaking temperatures are still on the way for some areas of San Diego County. That's tonight on the KPBS Weather Report.
Well, I hope everybody's been able to stay cool throughout the last couple of days. We have another day of this intense heat to get through, at least along the California coast, and then we'll finally start to feel better by Wednesday. But before then, some all-time record highs could topple. 134 in Death Valley, 125 in Palm Springs. Of course, right at the coast, it is going to stay at least a little bit cooler. But Los Angeles got awfully close to the triple digits again today. Satellite and radar showing lots of sunshine, a little bit of an offshore breeze, keeping the marine layer away. So already in the morning when the sun came out, the temperatures were jumping up the mercury. As we go through tonight, it'll stay mild, near 70 degrees in San Diego, 67 in Chula Vista, 65 degrees in Oceanside. Those three communities, at least during the day, not too hot, looking at low to mid 80s. But in some spots, that's still near record warmth because the Pacific, of course, still on the cool side, so any breeze coming off of that is naturally going to keep it a little bit cooler. But this area of high pressure over the Four Corners, that's what's been responsible for all the heat over the last couple of days. Still strong on Tuesday, so it's still going to keep that heat locked into the deserts of Southern California. LA could once again go for triple digits. San Diego looking at mid 80s. But again, there too, that is very unusually hot for this time of the year, so make sure you're drinking plenty of water. If you're going to be outside, take a lot of breaks in the shade. And if you don't have air conditioning, make sure you know where your cool spots are. Try and go find a public place like a library, maybe your favorite restaurant, to hang out between about 11 and 4 p.m. That's going to be the hottest time of the day, Tuesday and into the day on Wednesday as well. Here's a look at the 5-day forecast at the coast. Again, cooler than most places, but still in the middle 80s on Tuesday afternoon. We'll be much more comfortable from Wednesday on out. High temperatures will be back in the upper 70s. We'll see a few clouds in the morning as that marine layer drifts back in, and then more sunshine later on in the afternoon. Inland, a scorcher again on Tuesday with a high of 85 degrees. Upper 70s, though. Once we get past Tuesday, some cooler air will move in from the north and west, so much more breathable air, if you will. Clouds will limit the sunshine by the end of this week, but temperatures are not going to suffer all that much. Into the mountains, looking at 90s on Tuesday afternoon. Could even be a thunderstorm. Keep in mind, though, no moisture in the air, which means any thunderstorms that develop are not going to produce much rainfall. And therein lies a high wildfire threat when you get that lightning with the very hot, dry air. So please be careful if you're out in the wilderness over the next couple of days. Lots of sunshine Wednesday through Saturday, and here too, temperatures will sink back into the mid to upper 80s. Final stop in the deserts, again going for all-time record heat in some spots on Tuesday, and then temperatures will start to moderate very slowly through the rest of this week. I'm Heather Waldman for KPBS News.
Beach towels and beach fans spread out along the sand at La Jolla shores today. The waves offered some relief from the heat. Neighbors say they enjoyed seeing the return of the sun. One neighbor says she was happy to see a crowded beach.
It was getting a little bit like, when's the sun coming out? So now I think we're in for a good long stretch. Loving, loving, loving the sun and the heat.
An excessive heat wave for most areas will remain in effect until 8 o'clock Wednesday night. San Diego's heat wave is one of our top stories on our website. You can read more about the record-setting temperatures and see the conditions where you live online at kpbs.org. The U.S. Supreme Court today rejected a challenge to a ban on military-style assault weapons in New York and Connecticut. The law in both states prevents the sale of semi-automatic rifles similar to what a gunman used in the attack against a gay nightclub in Orlando this month. The Supreme Court hasn't heard a major gun case since 2010. Meanwhile, the families of the victims of the Newtown school massacre say gun makers should be held responsible for selling people military-style weapons. A lawyer for the families told a judge today that the AR-15 sold by Remington are similar to the military's M16 rifles. The latter can fire more than one round with each trigger pull. He says it's Remington's choice to continue selling the assault rifle despite mounting evidence of its use in the, quote, mass murder of innocent civilians. Remington is trying to get the lawsuit thrown out. A divided Senate blocked rival election year plans to curb guns today, 8 days after Orlando's mass shooting intensified pressure on lawmakers to act. In largely party-line votes, rejected were one proposal from each side to keep extremists from acquiring guns and another shoring up the government's existing system of required background checks for many firearms purchases. Democrats called the GOP proposals unacceptably weak, while Republicans said the Democratic plans were overly restrictive. The stalemate underscores the pressure on each party to give little ground on the emotional gun issue going into November's presidential and congressional elections. This month's massacre in Orlando has motivated a local man to give $200,000 to the Pride Center and the LGBT Studies program at San Diego State. Philanthropist David Gubser says he's giving because he believes people need to be more educated about the LGBT community. 4 Honduran refugees are in San Diego to try to raise awareness about the dangers of migrating to the U.S. Each is missing at least one limb, torn off by a deadly cargo train in Mexico. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero has the story.
If 30-year-old Honduran refugee Jose Luis Hernandez had his way, his fellow Central Americans would stop migrating to the U.S. He discussed this desire with 3 other dismembered migrants at a press conference held at San Diego's nonprofit Border Angels.
Build a wall.
In a way, he's like millions of Americans concerned about illegal immigration, who support proposals to build a wall along the U.S. Mexico border. But Hernandez thinks the U.S. has failed to stop illegal immigration so far because it has failed to understand what motivates people like him.
The American dream does not exist. What exists is a need. It's a forced migration.
When he tried to reach the U.S. on the roof of an infamous Mexican train known as La Bestia, he fainted from hunger and exhaustion and got caught beneath the wheels.
I looked at my trapped leg. I tried to take it out with my arm. And the train also tore off my arm.
Hernandez returned to Honduras, where he formed the Association for Returned Migrants with Disabilities, which educates people about the dangers of migrating. The association has documented more than 700 Hondurans mutilated by the train and nearly 400 killed in the last 6 years alone. But migrants keep coming.
Migration will stop only when our countries truly generate employment opportunities with fair wages.
Hernandez is visiting the U.S. with the hope of speaking with President Obama. He thinks only the U.S. can convince the Honduran government to enact healthy economic policies that will decrease violence and stop Hondurans from risking their lives to reach the U.S.
Central American countries, whether we want it or not, are puppets of the United States. They dance to the rhythm of whatever music this country plays.
He says the current U.S. strategy of sending money for Mexican customs to boost enforcement along the southern border is only increasing injuries and fatalities by forcing his countrymen onto more dangerous routes. He says more customs officials and longer fences won't deter migrants for the same reason dismemberment doesn't deter them. Because for them, it's currently a matter of life and death. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
You can find more of our interview with Hernandez on kpbs.org. Frontero's reporting is made possible in part through a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The Border Patrol has a new chief. He is Mark Morgan, a veteran of the FBI. His appointment today is unusual because historically a new head has been picked from among the ranks of the Border Patrol. But Morgan is not a stranger to the agency. The FBI loaned him to Customs and Border Protections to serve as acting assistant commissioner for internal affairs. Morgan replaces Michael Fisher, who retired in 2015 after 5 years on the job. Election officials in Mexico have officially declared a winner in Tijuana's mayoral race. He is Juan Manuel Gastelum with the right-of-center party known as the PAN, which rules the state of Baja. Officials say the former Mexican congressman got 23% of the vote. That means he'll be mayor starting in December unless 6 parties contesting the results have their way. Some are calling for a re-election based on perceived irregularities, such as the illegal opening of a warehouse where some ballots were stored. San Diego City Council will soon debate a local tax on businesses that sell recreational marijuana. The idea was moved forward today by the council's Rules Committee. The local marijuana tax would need the approval of San Diego voters and would be contingent on statewide approval of recreational pot. Councilman Mark Kersey proposed the tax. He says the statewide measure would not give cities enough money to cover the potential costs of legalization.
I do not want to divert money away from street repair or further stretch our public safety resources in order to manage an unorthodox legal framework that will be imposed on our city come November when this passes.
Kersey says the tax would not apply to medical marijuana sales. The City Council will discuss the tax again next month. When it comes to collecting and distributing child support payments, San Diego is outperforming other large counties in California. So says iNews Source reporter Chris Young, and he joins us now with the latest installment of our News in Numbers series. Chris, tell us what you found when you looked at statistics on child support payments.
Sure. Data from the state of California show that San Diego County collected and handed out 71% of child support payments on time in fiscal year 2015. That's 6 percentage points higher than the rate of other similar-sized counties and nearly 10 percentage points better than Los Angeles. Of course, this is important because Child Support Services is responsible for making sure kids receive the financial and medical support they need from their parents.
So what does this say about San Diego's program?
The county's high collection rate means the program is cost-effective. The county collected $3.73 for every dollar it spent on operating costs. That's more than $1.20 better than the statewide average.
Why is San Diego outperforming its peers?
That's not clear. Neither state nor county officials could explain the county's relative success on the performance measures.
Thank you, Chris. For more on this story, visit iNewsSource.org. Aetna and Humana are one step closer to merging after approval from the California Department of Managed Health Care. The state agency okayed the proposed merger under several conditions, including increased state oversight of its rates, improving its quality measures, and investing $48.5 million into community initiatives. Consumer Watchdog, a nonprofit that advocates for consumer interests, urged the Justice Department to reject the proposed merger, saying the deal would not result in savings for consumers. Since October, the Department of Managed Health Care has also given its approval to the mergers of Centene and HealthNet and Blue Cross Blue Shield and Care First. California's tax revenue for the month of May was right on target, coming in above the initial forecast at over $7 million. That's according to the latest Finance Department report. Year-to-date revenues were also $78 million above the original forecast. The rise in revenue comes after 2 months of major shortfalls. Unprecedented growth in personal income tax, sales and use tax, and insurance tax revenue helped make up for the fall in corporate tax revenue last month.
We know that our fortunes are going to change. We just don't know when. And so that is why the governor was very insistent on making sure that we had a fiscally prudent budget, that we took a lot of the additional resources that we were receiving from a growing economy and doing things like putting them into a rainy day fund, investing in infrastructure, making sure that the expenditures that we were committing to in the major areas are one-time in nature.
Last week, lawmakers passed the largest budget in the state's history. Finance experts say that California is not in the clear just yet and continue to caution against using recent trends to forge long-term forecasts. California lawmakers are getting ready to propose a new $2 billion measure to house the homeless. The bill would help cities build permanent shelters for the more than 115,000 homeless Californians reported last year. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development says 1 in 4 was living with a serious mental illness. The legislature could consider the measure later this week. Residential real estate has climbed back up in the 10 years since the housing crash. Now, an Associated Press analysis found a growing financial gap between renters and homeowners. Associated Press reporter Luke Sheridan takes a look at what may be behind this trend.
San Antonio is one of several areas across the country where construction is underway to address the latest trend in housing, an expanding group of people who can only afford to rent.
We would love to be able to buy a house right now, but financially, we really can't make those obligations.
An Associated Press analysis found that in the wake of the housing crash, homeownership is close to a 50-year low.
Usually 50% of new home purchases approximately are first-time buyers. The trend over the last number of years has been more like a third.
You excited? I'm gonna move in tomorrow.
Randall Poole relocated here when the Army transferred him to the nearby military base. And while he has owned a house in the past, an uncertain financial situation has now forced him to choose renting over buying. The AP analysis found that areas with healthy job markets have increased demand and pushed rental and buying costs higher.
We've definitely seen in the last decade a really high run-up in home values in the Washington, D.C. area. Property values from 2000 to 2010 doubled.
Historically low mortgage rates have helped strengthen the financial position of homeowners like Jim Phillips. He's been able to buy several condos and rents them at a profit.
Based on my income level, I need an opportunity to, lower my taxable income. So, right now, being a homeowner is really the best way to reduce my taxes.
The shift to renting has been especially visible in the Piedmont Park neighborhood of Apopka, Florida. More than a third of the homes here are rentals, up from 1 in 10 just a few years ago.
It's renter's market because, nobody can afford the down payment. Nobody can afford all that money you need up front for a house.
The split could ultimately worsen economic inequality. Whatever wealth most Americans possess exists mainly as equity in their homes. But the growing renter class doesn't have that equity, which means fewer Americans can build financial security. Luke Sheridan, The Associated Press.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, we head to London, where the world's most popular museum of modern art just got bigger. That's Monday on the PBS News Hour.
A moment of zen at California's capital. The Dalai Lama visited Sacramento for the first time today. He addressed a joint convention of the State Assembly and Senate. He talked about climate change, ethical leadership, and compassion. He also tackled issues of gun control in the United States.
Then in this country, now recent times, is talking about gun control. Real gun control must start here. More compassionate sort of feeling, sense of respect for others' life, others' right. That's the real method of gun control.
The Dalai Lama was scheduled to visit Sacramento in 2009, but his visit was canceled after Chinese diplomats lobbied against Dalai Lama and Tibet Awareness Day. They're trying to be just like us.
National parks. National parks! All right. So, who's going to help me up now?
The first family celebrated Father's Day weekend in Yosemite Park. President Obama spoke on climate change and how it is already damaging parks like Yosemite.
As we look ahead in the coming years and decades, rising temperatures could mean no more glaciers at Glacier National Park. No more Joshua trees at Joshua Tree National Park. Rising seas could destroy vital ecosystems in the Everglades. And at some point could even threaten icons like the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island. And that's not the America I want to pass on to the next generation.
The President's Weekend in the Great Outdoors was planned to encourage more people to visit some of the 400 national parks. The National Park Service celebrates its centennial in August. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, changes to the way people use underground water in California. The one thing local governments need to stop state regulators from taking over. And on Midday Edition, an official with the Department of Energy will join this week's meeting on San Onofre decommissioning. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us and have a great evening.